20 doctors failed to save the lonely billionaire, until the maid noticed something unbelievable. Before we dive in, let's light up this comment section with hearts from every corner of the world. The October rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Rothwell mansion, each droplet like a countdown to death itself. Inside the sterile master bedroom that had been transformed into a makeshift hospital ward, James Rothwell lay motionless, his 32-year-old frame barely recognizable under the tangle of IV lines and monitoring equipment. The steady beep of machines provided the only soundtrack to what everyone believed were his final days. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rothwell." Dr. Harrison, the 20th specialist to examine James, spoke with the gravity of a man delivering a death sentence. "We've exhausted every possibility. The neurological deterioration is unlike anything we've encountered. Your body is simply shutting down." James's piercing blue eyes, once sharp enough to negotiate billion-dollar deals, now struggled to focus. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "How long?" "Days, maybe a week at most." The words hung heavy in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. James had built an empire worth $8 billion, owned properties on 3 continents, and commanded respect from world leaders. Yet here he was, defeated by his own body, surrounded by the finest medical equipment money could buy and the most brilliant minds in medicine, all of whom had failed him. Outside in the hallway, Maria Santos clutched her 7-year-old daughter Emma's hand a little tighter. As the mansion's head housekeeper, Maria had worked for the Rothwell family for 5 years, maintaining the pristine condition of their 30-room estate. She'd watched James transform from a driven but approachable young heir into a cold, isolated billionaire after his parents' deaths 3 years ago. "Mummy, why are all those doctors here?" Emma asked in her sweet, curious voice, her dark eyes wide with concern. At 7 years old, she possessed an unusual combination of innocence and perceptive intelligence that often caught adults off guard. "The signor is very sick, mi amor," Maria replied softly, smoothing down her daughter's long brown hair. "We must be very quiet and stay out of the way." Emma nodded solemnly, but her mind was already working. She'd always been different from other children her age, more observant, more intuitive. While other kids played with toys, Emma preferred to watch people, to notice the small details that others missed. It was both a gift and a burden for a child so young. As they walked past the open bedroom door, Emma caught a glimpse of the pale man in the bed. Something about the scene struck her as wrong, though she couldn't yet articulate what it was. The doctors looked frustrated and defeated, their expensive suits and confident demeanors unable to mask their failure. 20 doctors, she heard one of them mutter as they passed. 20 of the best in the world, and we're no closer to a diagnosis than when we started. That evening, as Maria finished her cleaning duties, Emma sat in the mansion's vast library, surrounded by medical journals that James had ordered in his desperate search for answers. She couldn't read the complex terminology, but the pictures fascinated her. Diagrams of the human body, charts showing brain activity, images of diseases and treatments. She absorbed it all with the intensity of a scholar. "You shouldn't be in here, little one," came a weak voice from the doorway. Emma looked up to see James himself, supported by a metal walker, his tall frame bent with exhaustion. Even in his deteriorated state, he cut an imposing figure, dark hair now streaked with premature grey, strong jawline shadowed with stubble, and those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through people. "I'm sorry, Signor James," Emma said, jumping to her feet and preparing to flee. "No, wait," he said, surprising himself with his own words. James had never been particularly fond of children, finding them loud and unpredictable. But there was something different about Maria's daughter, a quiet dignity that reminded him of someone, though he couldn't place who. He made his way slowly to one of the leather chairs, each step clearly causing him pain. Emma watched with the focused attention she gave to everything, noting how his left hand trembled slightly more than his right, how he favored his left side when walking, how his breathing seemed shallow and forced. "Do you understand any of these books?" James asked, genuinely curious. Emma shook her head honestly, not the words. "But the pictures help me see how things work inside people." "And what do you see when you look at me?" The question was asked almost jokingly, But Emma took it seriously. She studied his face with the intensity of a medical professional, taking in details that had escaped 20 trained physicians. There was something there, something in the asymmetry of his features, the way his left eye drooped almost imperceptibly, the slight slur in his speech that was so subtle it could easily be attributed to medication. "You look tired," she said finally, "but not the kind of tired that sleep fixes." James felt a chill run down his spine at the accuracy of her observation. This child, barely 7 years old, had articulated what he'd been feeling better than any of his doctors. Over the next 3 days, as James's condition continued to deteriorate, Emma found herself drawn to observe him whenever possible. She would peek into his room during her mother's cleaning rounds, watching as yet more specialists came and went, each leaving with the same defeated expression. Dr. Patterson, a neurologist from Johns Hopkins, was examining James when Emma happened to pass by. She watched as he tested James's reflexes, noted the way James struggled to follow simple commands with his left side, observed the frustration in the doctor's voice as he muttered about atypical presentations and unprecedented symptom combinations. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Senor James, about the way the doctors looked at him like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. In her young mind, she began to form a theory that would have seemed impossible to anyone else. But Emma had always seen patterns where others saw chaos. The next morning brought Dr. Williams, the 21st specialist, to examine James. Emma watched from the hallway as he performed the same tests, asked the same questions, and reached the same conclusions as his predecessors. But as he packed up his equipment, Emma noticed something that made her heart race. The way James moved when he thought no one was watching, the slight improvement in his left-side coordination, the momentary clarity in his speech, the way his symptoms seemed to fluctuate based on who was in the room. It was subtle, so subtle that trained medical professionals had missed it, but to Emma's observant eyes it painted a picture that was both shocking and heartbreaking. She needed to tell someone, but who would believe a 7-year-old girl? More importantly, if her suspicions were correct, James wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting against someone who wanted him dead, and that someone was very close to him, close enough to have access to everything he ate and drank, close enough to monitor every moment of his supposed medical crisis. Emma realized with a wisdom far beyond her years that she might be the only person who could save James Rothwell's life. But first, she had to figure out how to prove what she suspected without putting herself, her mother, or James in even greater danger. Dr. Elizabeth Chen arrived at the Rothwell mansion on a grey Thursday morning, her reputation as one of the world's leading toxicologists preceding her. She was the 22nd specialist to examine James, and unlike her predecessors, she came with a different approach, not just to treat symptoms, but to search for external causes that others might have overlooked. Emma watched from the second-floor landing as Dr. Chen was escorted to James's room by a woman Emma had learned to distrust instinctively. Victoria Ashford, James's personal assistant and financial advisor, had been with him for 2 years, managing his daily schedule and personal affairs with ruthless efficiency. At 35, Victoria possessed the kind of classical beauty that graced magazine covers: platinum blonde hair always perfectly styled, emerald eyes that could shift from warm to calculating in an instant, and a figure that commanded attention in every room she entered. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming," Victoria said in her melodious voice, the one that seemed to hypnotize everyone around her. "James has been suffering for weeks now. We're all so worried about him." Emma noticed something the adults missed, the way Victoria's hand briefly touched the water glass on James's bedside table as she spoke, a gesture so quick and natural it appeared accidental. But Emma had been watching Victoria for days now, and she'd seen this same accidental contact with James's food and drinks repeatedly. As Dr. Chen began her examination, Emma crept closer to the partially open door. Unlike the other doctors, Dr. Chen asked different questions, not just about symptoms, but about James's daily routine, his diet, his environment. She took samples of everything: water, food remnants, even swabbed surfaces around his bed. "Have there been any changes in his household routine?" Dr. Chen asked. New medications, supplements, changes in diet or environment? Nothing significant, Victoria replied smoothly. I've maintained his usual schedule as much as possible. Same meals prepared by our chef. Same daily vitamins and supplements I've been giving him for months. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Victoria administered James's daily vitamins personally, something Emma had observed during her careful surveillance. Every morning at exactly 8 a.m., Victoria would bring James a small white dish containing various pills and capsules, along with a glass of fresh orange juice to help him swallow them. I'd like to test those supplements, Dr. Chen said. Sometimes even pharmaceutical-grade vitamins can be contaminated or interact in unexpected ways. Emma saw something flicker across Victoria's face, just for a microsecond, but it was there. Fear. Guilt. The same expression Emma had seen on her classmate Miguel's face when Sister Catherine asked who had broken the classroom crucifix. Of course, Victoria said, her smile never wavering. I'll gather everything for you right away. As Victoria left to retrieve the supplements, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She slipped into James's room, her small size allowing her to move unseen in the shadow of the medical equipment. "Senor James," she whispered urgently. James opened his eyes, struggling to focus on the small figure beside his bed. Over the past few days, he'd grown fond of Maria's daughter. There was something about her presence that brought him peace in a way no medication could. "Emma, you shouldn't be here, little one." "Listen to me, please," Emma said with an intensity that made James pay attention, despite his weakened state. "The medicine Senora Victoria gives you every morning. Don't take it tomorrow, please." "What?" James's mind struggled to process her words through the fog of his illness. "Promise me, don't take the vitamins tomorrow morning. Tell her you feel sick to your stomach." Before James could respond, Emma heard footsteps returning and quickly disappeared back into the hallway. James lay in his bed, confusion mixing with a growing sense of unease. Why would a 7-year-old girl tell him not to take his vitamins? It seemed like the ravings of a child's imagination, yet something in Emma's voice had carried the weight of absolute conviction. Dr. Chen returned with Victoria, who handed over a small bottle of high-end multivitamins. "These are the ones I give him every morning," Victoria explained. "They're from a very reputable company, specially formulated for men his age with high-stress lifestyles." As Dr. Chen examined the bottle, Emma positioned herself where she could observe. She watched as the doctor made notes, sealed the bottle in an evidence bag, and promised results within 48 hours. "In the meantime," Dr. Chen said, "I want to try a different approach to his treatment. Sometimes the body needs a complete break from all non-essential substances to reset itself. No vitamins, no supplements, nothing but prescribed medications and basic nutrition for the next few days." Emma felt a surge of hope. If her suspicions were correct, this break might be exactly what James needed to start recovering. That evening, as Maria finished her duties and prepared to take Emma home to their small apartment in the city, Emma lingered in the mansion's kitchen. She'd noticed that Victoria often prepared James's meals herself, claiming she wanted to ensure he received proper nutrition during his illness. Chef Rodriguez, who had worked for the Rothwells for 8 years, seemed puzzled by this arrangement. "It's strange, you know," he confided to Maria in rapid Spanish, not realizing that Emma was listening from the pantry doorway. "Señorita Victoria never showed interest in cooking before. Now she insists on preparing his meals personally. She says it's because she loves him, but..." "But what?" Maria asked. "There's something in her eyes when she thinks no one is watching. It's not love, Maria. It's something else. Something cold." Emma absorbed this information, adding it to the growing collection of observations that painted an increasingly sinister picture. That night, she lay in her small bed in their apartment, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together the puzzle of James Rothwell's mysterious illness. Her 7-year-old mind worked with the logic of pure innocence, unencumbered by adult assumptions about what was possible or probable. She thought about the medical journals she'd studied, about the way Victoria's behavior didn't match her words, about the pattern of James's symptoms that seemed to worsen after his morning vitamins and improve slightly when Victoria wasn't around. The next morning, Emma convinced her mother to arrive at the mansion earlier than usual. She positioned herself strategically, where she could observe the morning vitamin ritual between James and Victoria. At exactly 8 a.m., Victoria entered James's room carrying the familiar white dish and glass of orange juice. Emma watched as James, remembering her urgent plea from the day before, weakly shook his head. "I can't," he mumbled. "My stomach, feeling nauseous." For just a moment, Victoria's perfect composure cracked. Irritation flashed across her features before being quickly replaced by concerned sympathy. "Oh, darling, you need to maintain your strength," Victoria cooed, moving closer to his bedside. "These vitamins are essential for your recovery. The doctor said—" "Doctor." "Chen said no supplements," James interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "She wants me to stop everything non-essential." Emma saw Victoria's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Dr. Chen doesn't understand your specific needs like I do. I've been caring for you for 2 years, James. Trust me." But James, perhaps influenced by Emma's warning or simply too ill to argue, refused to take the vitamins. Victoria stood there for several long moments, the glass of orange juice trembling slightly in her hand, before finally setting everything down on the bedside table with forced gentleness. "Of course, darling. We'll try again later when you're feeling better." As Victoria left the room, Emma noticed something that made her blood run cold. Instead of taking the untouched vitamins with her, Victoria left them on James's bedside table. But as she passed the table, her hand moved in a quick, practiced motion, and suddenly the vitamins were gone, not into the wastebasket, but into her pocket. Emma realized that Victoria was destroying evidence, and she was running out of time. If Dr. Chen's tests came back inconclusive, if James continued to deteriorate, if Victoria found another way to administer whatever was making him sick, then the only person who might be able to save a billionaire's life was a 7-year-old girl who wasn't sure anyone would believe her. That afternoon brought news that sent chills through the mansion. James had taken a turn for the worse, slipping into unconsciousness during his afternoon rest. The doctors were baffled. His condition had been stable all morning, but suddenly he was unresponsive. Emma knew with terrible certainty what had happened. Somehow, despite the morning's refusal, Victoria had found another way. And time was running out for both James and the little girl who held the key to saving his life. The emergency alarm pierced the mansion's silence at 3:47 p.m., sending staff members scrambling through the marble corridors like ants from a disturbed hill. James had flatlined for 37 seconds before Dr. Martinez, the on-call physician, managed to resuscitate him. Now he lay in an even more critical condition, his breathing assisted by a ventilator, his skin taking on the grayish pallor that medical professionals recognized as the approach of death. Emma pressed herself against the hallway wall, tears streaming down her 7-year-old cheeks as she watched the frantic activity around James's room. She'd failed him. Despite her warning about the vitamins, despite her growing certainty about what was happening, Victoria had found another way to administer whatever was slowly killing him. "Mummy, is Senor James going to die?" Emma asked when Maria found her hiding in the laundry closet, her small body shaking with sobs. Maria knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms. "I don't know, mi amor, but we must pray for him." Through her tears, Emma noticed something that made her heart race with both hope and terror. Dr. Chen was walking rapidly down the hallway, her face grim but purposeful, carrying a sealed folder that looked like test results. Behind her followed 2 men in dark suits who didn't look like doctors at all. "Maria," Dr. Chen called out, spotting the housekeeper, "I need to speak with you and your daughter privately. It's extremely urgent." They were led into the mansion's library, where Dr. Chen closed the door and turned to face them with an expression Emma had never seen on an adult's face when looking at her. Complete and respectful attention, as if she were speaking to another grown-up. "Emma," Dr. Chen said, kneeling down to the little girl's eye level. "Your mother told me that you've been watching Mr. Rothwell very carefully. I need you to tell me everything you've noticed, no matter how small or strange it might seem." Emma looked at her mother uncertainly. Maria squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Tell her, mi amor. Tell her everything." The words came tumbling out of Emma in a mixture of English and Spanish, her child's vocabulary struggling to express observations that would have impressed seasoned investigators. She told Dr. Chen about Victoria's behavior around James's food and drinks, about the way his symptoms seemed to worsen after Victoria's visits, about the morning vitamin ritual, and how Victoria had pocketed the refused pills rather than disposing of them properly. Doctor. Chen listened with growing intensity, occasionally asking clarifying questions that helped Emma articulate what she'd observed. The two men in suits, who introduced themselves as Detective Morrison and Agent Fields from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, took detailed notes, their expressions becoming increasingly serious. Emma, Doctor, Chen said when the girl had finished her account, "You may have just saved Mr. Rothwell's life. The vitamin bottle that Ms. Ashford gave me yesterday, it contained selenium, a trace mineral that's harmless in normal amounts, but extremely toxic when concentrated. Someone had been replacing regular vitamins with selenium supplements, slowly poisoning him over a period of months." Emma felt a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that adults finally believed her, horror at the confirmation of what she'd suspected. "Is he going to be okay?" "We caught it in time, thanks to you," Dr. Chen said gently. "We've started treatment to remove the selenium from his system, but we need your help with something else. We need to prove that Ms. Ashford was the one doing this, and that's not going to be easy." Detective Morrison spoke up, his voice kind but serious. "Emma, what you've told us is very important, but in court we'll need more than observations. We need evidence, something that proves Ms. Ashford was deliberately poisoning Mr. Rothwell." Emma thought for a moment, her young mind working through the problem with startling clarity. "She keeps things in her office," she said suddenly. "Private things in a locked drawer in her desk. I saw her put the vitamins from this morning in there, and other small bottles too." "How do you know about her locked drawer?" Agent Fields asked. "I was hiding under her desk once when Mummy was cleaning her office. Senora Victoria came in and opened a drawer with a key she keeps on a chain around her neck. She put something in there and said to herself, 'Soon, darling James, soon you'll be at peace.'" The adults exchanged glances. Dr. Chen reached out and gently touched Emma's shoulder. "You're incredibly brave and observant, Emma. But now I need you to promise me something. Stay away from Ms. Ashford. What she's been doing is very dangerous, and if she realizes you know about it, you could be in danger too." As if summoned by their conversation, Victoria's voice echoed through the mansion's intercom system. "All staff to the main foyer, please. We need to discuss new security measures given Mr. Rothwell's critical condition." Emma felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. Through the library window, she could see Victoria standing in the foyer, her platinum hair gleaming under the chandelier's light, her emerald eyes scanning the assembled staff with what looked like barely controlled panic. "She knows," Emma whispered, a chill running down her spine. "She knows something has changed." "Doctor." Chen stood up, her expression now one of urgency. "Detective Morrison, we need to move quickly. If she suspects we're onto her, she might try to destroy evidence or worse." "Agreed," Morrison replied, speaking rapidly into his radio. "Units are already surrounding the property, but we need to be careful, if she panics." Emma watched through the glass as Victoria's posture shifted from professional concern to something more dangerous. Victoria said something quickly to Dr. Martinez, then began walking purposefully toward the library, her high heels clicking against the marble floor with increasing urgency. "She's coming here," Emma breathed, pressing closer to her mother. Dr. Chen moved swiftly to the library door, but before she could reach it, it swung open. Victoria stood in the doorway, and for the first time since Emma had known her, the woman's perfect composure was cracking. Her emerald eyes darted between the adults and finally settled on Emma, with an intensity that made the little girl's skin crawl. "I couldn't help but notice the rather intense discussion happening in here," Victoria said, her voice still melodious, but carrying an underlying tension, "particularly involving my responsibilities toward James's care. I hope there isn't some misunderstanding about my dedication to his recovery." Dr. Chen stepped protectively closer to Emma and Maria. "Ms. Ashford, we were just discussing Mr. Rothwell's treatment protocols, nothing that concerns you directly." "Oh, but everything concerning James concerns me directly," Victoria replied, her mask slipping further. "I've been managing every aspect of his life for 2 years. His meals, his medications, his daily routine, everything. Surely you understand that any changes to his care should go through me first. Emma realized with the terrible clarity that sometimes comes to children in moments of crisis that she wasn't just a witness anymore. She was the only person standing between Victoria and the destruction of evidence that could save James's life. And Victoria, cornered and desperate, was no longer the composed assistant she'd pretended to be. The 7-year-old girl who had spent weeks observing and deducing, who had noticed what 20 medical specialists had missed, now faced the most important moment of her young life. Everything she'd learned, everything she'd observed, everything that could save James Rothwell's life, now depended on what happened in the next few minutes. Outside, James fought for his life against the poison in his system. Inside the library, his salvation rested in the hands of a little girl who had always seen patterns where others saw chaos, and who now had to be braver than any 7-year-old should ever have to be. The tension in the library stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Emma could feel her mother's protective hand on her shoulder, could sense Dr. Chen's barely controlled urgency, and could see the dangerous calculation behind Victoria's emerald eyes as the woman assessed exactly how much they knew. "Of course, your dedication has been remarkable," Dr. Chen replied carefully, her medical training helping her maintain composure under pressure. "However, given Mr. Rothwell's critical condition, we're exploring every possible avenue. Sometimes fresh perspectives can reveal overlooked factors." Victoria's smile became razor-sharp. Fresh perspectives from a housekeeper and her child? Her gaze fell on Emma, with an intensity that made the 7-year-old instinctively step behind her mother. "I'm curious what kind of medical insights a little girl might offer." Detective Morrison chose that moment to speak up, his voice carrying the authority of law enforcement. "Ms. Ashford, we're conducting a thorough investigation into Mr. Rothwell's condition. I'm sure you understand our need to examine all aspects of his care." The word investigation hit Victoria like a physical blow. Emma watched as the woman's carefully maintained facade finally began to crumble. Her left hand moved unconsciously to the silver keychain around her neck, the same gesture Emma had observed whenever Victoria accessed her locked desk drawer. "Investigation!" Victoria's voice remained steady, but Emma noticed the slight tremor, the way her breathing had become more shallow. "Surely you don't suspect?" "I mean, James has been under the care of 22 specialists, if there were any external factors." 22 specialists who were looking for natural causes," Agent Fields interjected smoothly. "We're looking at other possibilities." Emma felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her small shoulders. These adults were dancing around the truth, speaking in careful code words, while James lay upstairs fighting for his life. The selenium was still in his system, still damaging his organs, and every minute they spent in polite conversation was a minute stolen from his chances of survival. "The vitamins," Emma said suddenly, her young voice cutting through the adult tension like a knife through silk. "You need to test the ones in her desk drawer, the ones she took from Signor James's room this morning." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, calculation, and finally cold fury. Her hand tightened around the keychain until her knuckles went white. "I have no idea what this child is talking about," Victoria said, but her voice had lost its melodious quality. "Children have such vivid imaginations. They see mysteries and conspiracies everywhere." Dr. Chen stepped forward, positioning herself between Victoria and Emma. "Emma has been very observant about Mr. Rothwell's daily routine. Perhaps you could help us understand why you personally administer his vitamins each morning. That seems unusual for someone in your position." "I care about James deeply," Victoria replied. But the words sounded rehearsed now, desperate. We have a personal relationship beyond the professional. I wanted to ensure he received proper care during his illness." Emma noticed something the adults missed. Victoria's free hand had moved to her jacket pocket, where she was gripping something small and hard. The same pocket where Emma had seen her place the refused vitamins that morning. "She has them with her," Emma whispered urgently to her mother in Spanish. "In her pocket, the vitamins from this morning." Maria quickly translated for Dr. Chen, who immediately alerted Detective Morrison with a subtle gesture. The detective's hand moved slightly toward his jacket, a motion that Victoria caught instantly. The pretense finally shattered completely. "You know what?" Victoria said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'm tired of this charade. Yes, I've been giving James special vitamins. Yes, I have access to everything he eats and drinks. And yes, that little brat has been watching me like some kind of spy." She pulled a small bottle from her pocket, the same selenium-laced supplements that Emma had watched her hide that morning. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone squander $8 billion? To see resources that could change the world wasted on a man who has no vision, no purpose beyond accumulating more wealth?" Emma felt her mother pull her closer as Victoria's mask completely fell away, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "James was going to die anyway," Victoria continued, her voice gaining a manic edge. "Rich men like him always do. Heart attacks, accidents, overdoses. I just accelerated the timeline. And when he died, his will would have left everything to his foundation, with me as the primary executor. I could have used that money for real change, real impact." "You were killing him," Emma said, her 7-year-old voice carrying more moral authority than all the adults in the room. "You were supposed to help him, but you were making him sick instead." Victoria laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or sanity. "Help him? That man was a walking waste of oxygen. Do you know how many people I could feed with $8 billion? How many diseases I could cure? How many lives I could save?" Detective Morrison was moving now, his hand on his weapon, but Victoria was already backing toward the library's second exit, the one that led to the mansion's rear gardens. "The difference between you and me, little girl," Victoria snarled at Emma, "is that I understand that sometimes one person has to die so that thousands can live. Your precious Senor James was a sacrifice for the greater good." "That's not how it works," Emma replied with the simple clarity that only children possess. "You don't get to decide who lives and dies. That's not your choice to make." Victoria's eyes filled with rage at being lectured by a 7-year-old. She raised the bottle of selenium supplements like a weapon, and for a terrifying moment, Emma thought the woman might actually try to force them down her throat. But Detective Morrison was faster. His voice cut through the air with deadly authority. "Victoria Ashford, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud. Drop the bottle and put your hands where I can see them." Victoria looked around the room at the faces surrounding her. Dr. Chen's professional disgust, Detective Morrison's determined resolve, Maria's protective fury, and Emma's unwavering moral certainty. The game was over, and she knew it. "This isn't finished," she whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. The bottle slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor, selenium supplements scattering across the Persian rug like deadly confetti. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Emma felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. They had stopped Victoria, but the knowledge of what adults were capable of doing to each other would stay with her forever. She had helped save James's life, but in doing so, she had lost some of the innocence that every 7-year-old deserves to keep. Outside, sirens wailed as FBI forensic teams arrived to collect evidence. Inside, Dr. Chen was already calling the hospital to arrange for chelation therapy to remove the remaining selenium from James's system. And somewhere in the mansion's master bedroom, a billionaire who had been hours away from death was about to begin the long journey back to life, saved by the observations of a little girl who noticed what 22 medical specialists had missed. The truth, as Emma was learning, was sometimes more powerful than all the money in the world. 3 days after Victoria's arrest, James Rothwell opened his eyes for the first time in 48 hours. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, casting golden patterns across the medical equipment that still surrounded his bed, though many of the machines had been removed as his condition steadily improved. Emma stood in the doorway, holding her mother's hand tightly. She'd been visiting every day since Dr. Chen had begun the chelation therapy to remove the selenium from James's system, watching with fascination as the man who had been dying slowly returned to life. "How are you feeling, Senor James?" Emma asked softly, approaching his bedside with the careful dignity she'd maintained throughout this entire ordeal. James turned his head toward her voice, and for the first time in months, his blue eyes were completely clear and focused. "Emma," he whispered, his voice still weak but no longer slurred, "I owe you my life, don't I? Emma nodded solemnly. The doctors helped too, and the police and Mummy. But mostly I just watched and remembered what I saw. Dr. Chen entered the room, carrying a clipboard full of test results that told the story of a remarkable recovery. "Good morning, Mr. Rothwell. Your selenium levels have dropped to normal ranges, and your neurological function is returning to baseline. In another week, you should be completely recovered." James struggled to sit up, and Emma quickly moved to adjust his pillows, a gesture so natural and caring that it brought tears to Maria's eyes. "Doctor Chen, I need to understand exactly what happened. Victoria, she was poisoning me." "For approximately 6 months, Dr. Chen confirmed. Selenium poisoning causes exactly the symptoms you experienced: neurological deterioration, muscle weakness, cognitive impairment. In the doses she was giving you, it would have been fatal within another few days." 6 months, James repeated, processing the betrayal. She was planning this for 6 months, and 22 doctors missed it. 22 doctors who were looking for natural causes, Emma said with the practical wisdom that had saved his life. They didn't think to look for someone hurting you on purpose. James studied the 7-year-old girl who had accomplished what the medical establishment had failed to do. "Emma, how did you know? What made you suspect Victoria when no one else did?" Emma climbed into the chair beside his bed, her feet dangling several inches from the floor. "You were sicker when she was around," she said simply, "and she touched your food and drinks when she thought no one was watching. And her eyes, they weren't sad like everyone else's when you got worse. They were different." "Different how?" "Like she was waiting for something good to happen, but she had to pretend to be sad about it." James felt a chill at the accuracy of her observation. Victoria had indeed been waiting for him to die so she could control his $8 billion estate. The FBI had discovered her elaborate plans during their search of her apartment. Forged documents, altered wills, offshore accounts already established to receive the foundation funds she would have controlled. Detective Morrison knocked on the doorframe and entered when James waved him in. "Mr. Rothwell, I wanted to update you on the investigation. Ms. Ashford has confessed to attempted murder and fraud. She'll be facing federal charges that could result in life imprisonment." "What about her claims that she was doing it for the greater good?" James asked. "All that talk about using the money to help people?" Morrison's expression was grim. "Pure fabrication. The accounts we found were personal, not charitable. She would have kept every penny for herself. The greater good speech was just her justification for murder." Emma had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up with a question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Senor James, are you going to do good things with your money now?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. James looked at this remarkable child who had not only saved his life, but was now calling him to account for how he lived it. "What do you think I should do, Emma?" "I think you should help people," she said without hesitation. "Real people who need help. Like families who can't afford doctors when they get sick. Like kids who don't have enough food. Like—" She gestured around the opulent bedroom. "Like people who don't have warm places to live." James found himself laughing for the first time in months, not the bitter cynicism that had characterized his recent years, but genuine warmth. "You know what, Emma? I think you're absolutely right." Over the following days, as James's strength returned and his mind cleared completely, he found himself spending more time with Emma than with the parade of business associates and lawyers who came to discuss his affairs. The little girl had a way of cutting through complexity to reach simple truths that adults often missed. "Why don't you have a family?" Emma asked one afternoon as they sat in the mansion's garden, watching Maria tend to the flower beds that had been neglected during James's illness. "I had parents," James said carefully. "They died in a car accident 3 years ago. After that, I just focused on work, on making money. I didn't think about much else. That sounds lonely. It was lonely. I thought having money would be enough, but it just made me a target for people like Victoria." Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important topics. "Maybe the money isn't the problem. Maybe it's what you do with it that matters." "Is that what you think?" "Mummy says that God gives people different gifts. Some people are good at singing, some people are good at fixing things, some people are good at making money. But all the gifts are supposed to help other people, not just yourself. James felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight, cold knot that had lived there since his parents' death. "Your mother is a very wise woman, and so are you." "I'm not wise," Emma protested. "I just notice things." "Emma, the ability to notice things that other people miss, that's a very special kind of wisdom. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's not important." That evening, James made several phone calls that would have surprised the business world had they been listening. He called his lawyers to discuss establishing a new foundation, one that would focus on medical care for underprivileged children, education programs for gifted children from low-income families, and housing assistance for working families like Maria's. He also made another call to the Dean of Columbia University's medical school, inquiring about scholarship programs and research funding. If a 7-year-old girl could see what 22 specialists had missed, perhaps it was time to start thinking differently about how medical professionals were trained. But the most important call was to Maria, asking her to bring Emma to his study that evening. When they arrived, they found James sitting behind a desk that was no longer covered with stock reports and acquisition plans, but with architectural drawings and foundation documents. "Emma," he said, "I want to ask you something very important. I'm going to start a new foundation to help children and families who need medical care and education. Would you like to help me decide how to spend the money?" Emma's eyes widened. "You want me to help? I want you to be one of my advisors. You see things that adults miss and you understand what real people need. I think you could help me make sure the money goes to the right places." Emma looked at her mother, who was wiping tears from her eyes. "Mommy, can I?" "Sí, mi amor. I think you would be very good at helping people." As Emma climbed into the chair across from James's desk, the same chair where business rivals had once trembled during negotiations, James realized that being saved by this remarkable child was just the beginning. She hadn't just given him back his life, she had given him a purpose worth living for. The girl who had noticed patterns where others saw chaos was about to help him create a pattern of generosity and compassion that would ripple outward far beyond anything Victoria could have imagined in her twisted dreams of doing good by doing evil. 6 months later, James Rothwell stood in the main hall of the newly opened Emma Santos Medical Center for Children, watching as the 7-year-old girl who had saved his life cut the ribbon with scissors almost too big for her small hands. The crowd erupted in applause, but Emma's attention was focused on the children in wheelchairs and their families, who would be the first patients at the facility. "How does it feel to have a hospital named after you?" James asked, as photographers captured the moment. "It feels big," Emma replied honestly, still holding the ceremonial scissors. "But good big, not scary big." The Emma Santos Medical Center was just the first of many projects that had emerged from their unlikely partnership. In the 6 months since Victoria's arrest and James's recovery, they had established 12 scholarship programs, funded 3 pediatric research initiatives, and created a foundation specifically designed to identify and nurture exceptional children from underserved communities. Dr. Chen, who had become the medical center's chief of pediatric toxicology, approached them with a smile. "Emma, there's someone I'd like you to meet." She gestured to a young boy about Emma's age, who was standing nearby with his parents. "This is Miguel. He's 8 years old, and he noticed something about his baby sister that 3 different doctors missed. Because of his observations, she was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition and is now receiving treatment." Emma's eyes lit up with recognition. "You notice things too?" Miguel nodded shyly. "My sister wasn't growing right, but the doctors said she was just small. But I saw that she held her head different than other babies, and she didn't like loud sounds. When I told the doctors to look at her ears, they found out she was born with a hearing problem that was making everything else wrong." "That's really smart," Emma said with genuine admiration. "Kids see things differently than grown-ups do." James watched this interaction with profound satisfaction. The Foundation's most successful program had turned out to be the Young Observer Initiative, a network designed to teach medical professionals to take seriously the observations of children who, like Emma and Miguel, possessed unusual gifts for noticing patterns and details that adults often overlooked. Detective Morrison approached, carrying a thick file folder. Mr. Rothwell, I wanted to update you on Victoria's sentencing. She received 30 years for attempted murder and fraud. The judge specifically mentioned that the sophisticated nature of her plan, combined with the betrayal of trust, warranted the maximum penalty. 30 years, James repeated. She would have been free to spend my money if Emma hadn't noticed what she was doing. The FBI estimates she would have controlled approximately $8 billion within a year of your death, Morrison continued, and our forensic accountants confirmed that none of it would have gone to charitable causes. It was all for personal use. Emma, who had been listening, asked the question that had been bothering her for months. Did she ever really care about you, Senor James? Or was it always just pretend? James knelt down to Emma's eye level, a gesture that had become natural to him over the past months. I think she convinced herself that she cared, Emma. But real caring means wanting what's best for someone else, even when it's hard for you. Victoria wanted what was best for Victoria. That's sad, Emma said, with the pure empathy that had first drawn James to trust her observations. She could have asked you to help people with your money instead of trying to steal it. You're right, she could have. But some people think they're the only ones who know what's right, and that gives them permission to do terrible things. Dr. Chen rejoined their conversation, carrying a clipboard full of papers. Actually, speaking of doing good things with money, I have some wonderful news. The research grant we provided to Johns Hopkins has yielded its first breakthrough. They've identified a new treatment protocol for selenium poisoning that could help hundreds of future victims. Because of what happened to you? Emma asked James. Because of what you observed happening to me, James corrected gently. Your notes about my symptoms, combined with Dr. Chen's test results, gave the researchers a complete picture of selenium poisoning progression. Other people will be saved because you were brave enough to speak up. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. So something good came from something bad. Something very good, James confirmed. That's often how the best things happen. People who care about each other work together to make sure bad things don't happen to anyone else. As the afternoon celebration continued, James found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought him to this moment. A year ago, he had been a bitter, isolated billionaire, suspicious of everyone's motives and focused solely on accumulating more wealth. Today he was standing in a children's hospital, funded by his fortune, named after a 7-year-old girl who had saved his life through pure observation and moral courage. The foundation had already helped over 2,000 children receive medical care they couldn't otherwise afford. The scholarship programs had identified and supported 47 exceptionally gifted children from low-income families, and the Young Observer Initiative had trained medical professionals in 12 states to recognize and value the insights that children like Emma could provide. Senor James, Emma said, tugging on his sleeve, I have something for you. She handed him a drawing she had made, a crayon picture of the two of them standing together in front of the hospital, surrounded by smiling children and families. At the bottom, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, she had written, For my friend who learned that money is for helping people. James felt tears prick his eyes as he studied the drawing. Emma, this is the most valuable thing anyone has ever given me. More valuable than money. Much more valuable than money. This is worth all the money in the world. As the sun set over the medical center, casting golden light through the windows of the pediatric wing, where children were already receiving care that would change their lives, James realized that Victoria had been wrong about everything. She had believed that one person had to die so that thousands could live, but the truth was exactly the opposite. One person, a 7-year-old girl with extraordinary gifts of observation and an unshakable moral compass, had chosen to act with courage and compassion. Because of her choice, not only had James lived, but thousands of others would benefit from the foundation they had built together. The money hadn't changed. $8 billion was still $8 billion. But the purpose had transformed completely. Instead of being hoarded by a bitter recluse or stolen by a narcissistic killer, it was now flowing outward like ripples on a pond, touching lives in ways that would continue long after both James and Emma were gone. As they walked through the hospital corridors together, the billionaire and the little girl who had saved him, James understood with perfect clarity that he had received far more than he had given. Emma had saved his life twice, once from Victoria's poison, and once from the spiritual emptiness that had been consuming him long before he ever became physically ill. "Emma," he said as they paused in front of a window overlooking the children's playground that would open next week, "do you know what the most important thing I've learned this year is?" "What?" "That the best way to live is to pay attention to the people around you, really pay attention the way you do. And when you see someone who needs help, you help them, even if it's scary or hard." Emma nodded seriously. "That's what Mummy always says. She says we're all supposed to take care of each other. Your mother is right, and you, Emma Santos, are the best teacher I've ever had." As they walked toward the hospital's main entrance, where Maria was waiting to take Emma home, James made a silent promise to himself and to the remarkable child beside him. He would spend the rest of his life proving worthy of the second chance she had given him, and he would never forget that the most profound wisdom often comes from the smallest voices, if only we have the humility to listen. The little girl who had noticed what 22 medical specialists had missed was about to go home to do her homework and play with her toys, just like any other 7-year-old. But she had changed the world in ways that would echo through generations, proving that heroes come in all sizes, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply a child who cares enough to pay attention.